Industries that are hot, sectors set to outperform the market. That's what's here in Zacks Industry Rank Analysis. Charles Rotblatt, our senior market analyst at Zacks.com, puts this report together for us each week. He joins me now once again to elaborate on same. And on the Rotblatt radar this week are the Chipmakers. And we're not talking about potato chips either.
We should, though. Much tastier.
You are telling us that the Chipmakers are dealing with both inventory and demand issues. How so?
They are. We've talked about Micron before, and even last year, or earlier this year, if you asked me about Micron, I would have told you that I expect conditions to improve this year. Unfortunately, they haven't. Micron is a leading maker of DRAM, and DRAM basically is a short-term memory your computer uses to run the programs. There's an oversupply. Even as we've continued to have this inventory glut, the foundries really have not cut back in production enough. So we're seeing this inventory glut continue far longer than anybody thought. So we have this going on. Compounding matters, we have Microsoft Vista, and I talk about a little bit in the column today. Anyone who knows me, especially in the office, knows I absolutely hate Vista. I have little good to say about it.
From a navigational perspective.
From a navigational, of course. No, but seriously, I'm about to buy Macintosh at home because I just don't want the calls from my wife not being able to find things with the program, and of course all the problems I'm having here.
Right.
And obviously in the office I can call PC support. At home I am PC support, so big difference. But a lot of corporations are not upgrading to Vista. They're just fearful of doing so. And it's interesting. There was an article this week in Newsweek talking about how Lenovo, which makes computers and it only sells PCs that run Vista, runs its own computers in its office on XP.
Well, that's the new operating system now, so anybody not willing to make the upgrade apparently is going to be behind the technology curve at one point.
They are at some point, but for right now, it's causing a slackening demand for PCs.
Yeah.
And you put in a situation where you have people not wanting to upgrade to the primary operating system, and now we're looking at sluggish worldwide economic growth. We're starting to see PC demand drop. So all of a sudden you have this oversupply of one type of chip, slower demand for PCs, and then if you look at the third rung, which I talk about, which are handheld devices, we're starting to see some mixed picture about that. Texas Instruments recently came out, revised their guidance. They narrowed their guidance, so they didn't cut. They really said it's going to come between the high and low end of what they forecast before, but they said in their wireless group, they're starting to see some mixed signals. Rubicon, I talk about them. They make devices for they make chips for handheld devices. They're starting to see weakening demand. They talked about orders being pushed back into 2009. So really, you're looking at excess supply of inventory and slackening demand, and obviously the laws of economic supply and demand. You've got both weakening. That's not a good scenario for any industry. And we talk about semiconductors, where we can talk about Micron, we can talk about Texas Instruments, we can talk about Intel. Across the board, we're starting to see analysts cut estimates.
What role is the economy playing in this standoffishness as far as ordering new technology, ordering new PCs in business anyway? Maybe not on the personal level, but in the business community. What role is the economy? Is it the economy stymieing the plans to expand in that area?
I think it is. We haven't seen any numbers really quantifying what the economic slump is having on business, but it definitely is. If you're an IT director, you're looking at budget cuts, maybe a budget constraint, and you're also looking at maybe moving from XP to Vista, you really got to ask yourself, is it really worth the investment where XP runs fine? You don't want to do anything to hurt worker productivity. Anytime you just give someone a new PC, there's always a little bit of lag because they have their computer set to do a certain way, certain folders, etc. But Vista is really a very different operating system. And menus have completely changed. And so at a time where you're trying to maximize productivity, it's really questionable for a business as to whether or not they want to spend the money. And that's outside of any issues with Vista itself. So I definitely think there's an argument to be made that if you're a corporate IT director or someone who's in charge of making those purchase decisions,
right,
looking at what's going on, I think the added benefit of having Vista from a productivity standpoint is very limited at most. So it's definitely having an impact. And obviously on consumer spending, if people are worried about putting gas in their tanks, worried about making their house payment, the last thing they're going to do is say, you know what, I need to replace my 3 or 4-year-old computer.
Although I do find it curious at this particular time when Google is trying to make inroads in the mobile device market that there is a sluggish demand for these mobile devices. I mean, we've had a big splash on the iPhone. not long ago. Now Google is trying to come out with their version of a handheld device of a similar nature. I would have thought that the public's appetite, now we revert back to the consumer again, I would have thought that their appetite for these devices still existed at a decent level here.
Well, Google's phone, the operating system has been codenamed the Android, and I know they just announced it. I don't know if they changed the name of it or not, but this has actually been in the works for a while before we really saw this drop-off in demand. But we are seeing weakening demand. Over the summer, we saw BlackBerry suggest they're seeing some weakness in their end-user markets. So, yeah, the timing for Google is not exactly great. But I think Google's really looking at places where they can gain market share. And Google's the type of company where they're not really expecting to make a big splash immediately, but they realize they look over the long term. I think they see mobile devices as an area where they could really move into and really grab a lot of market share. Right now, it's pretty open. In terms of smartphones, BlackBerry pretty much is the leader. Microsoft has made some inroads with its Windows mobile device software. Palm's still in existence, but honestly, every time I talk bad about Palm, we always get some feedback. But Palm came with a new phone. Battery life is terrible on it. So I think if you're Google and you have the massive cash balance that Google has, I think it's really a case where you're willing to maybe deal with some short-term weakness to get the longer-term goal.
And you tell us the Sox remain in a 14-month slump. We're not talking about a ball team there, are we?
We're not. Here in Chicago, we're pro-White Sox, hoping the White Sox can get in a play to the postseason as the Cubs already have. But the Sox is the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index. And really since last July of 2007, the index hit a peak then, and it's been dropping off since. Where it closed at yesterday was more than a 5-year low. We're looking at levels not seen since the spring of 2003. So from a technical basis, that's very bearish.
All right, well, you kind of backdoored some stock names into the conversation, as you so cleverly do. Do you own any of them?
I do not.
All right, Charles' entire text version of his industry rank analysis and commentary may be viewed online. You can link to it right off of our homepage at Zacks.com. With Charles Rotblatt, I'm Terry Ruffalo.